This is just a sample of the audiobook. To get the complete audiobook, access the link posted in the first comment.
Italy began for me south of Naples, in a modest-sized town perched on a tough stone cliff above the Mediterranean. Since Roman antiquity, Vico Equense has been a slice of paradise, of seaside villas with stunning views over the Gulf of Naples to Mount Vesuvius. It was also the birthplace of my maternal grandparents, who immigrated to New York between the Great Wars and presided over an Italian-style deli on First Avenue called Ralph's. As a very young boy, I'd seen photographs and heard of Vico's unrivaled beauty and the sweet produce from its volcanic soils. I'd gotten a taste of this world in my grandmother's tiny Manhattan kitchen, in her earthy baked artichokes, her deeply aromatic wine-stewed Genovese Napoletana pasta sauce, and the melting layers of her eggplant parmigiana. This was where I first learned that food could alchemize into emotion, and that a meal could be an intoxicating adventure. Accompanying it all was the wine. By the time I came around, my grandfather, Raffaele, or Ralph, had stopped fermenting California grapes in the deli's basement, and instead brought home straw basket bottles, or fiaschi, of Chianti, which he taught me to uncork. More than anything, I sensed that my grandparents' old country had taught them a different way of being in the world. Ralph was a joyful, big-nosed, singlet-wearing, cigar-smoking Southerner who had traveled to New York as a young man. Apparently, after having too much of a good time there as a bachelor in the roaring 20s, his family arranged for him to return to Vico to marry a young woman, my grandmother, from a Vico family. After they wed, the couple returned to New York. What I remember most about Ralph was his untroubled outlook and generosity. Family legend had it that after he'd lost his savings at the start of the Great Depression, he'd spent the last $2 in his pocket on a show. His reasoning was that he'd started in the United States with nothing and would do it again. If people from the neighborhood didn't have enough money to pay their grocery bills, Ralph offered credit, making notes in the store ledger. If a homeless person came in, Ralph made him a meatball sandwich. My grandmother, who carried herself with deliberate formality, her silver hair tightly pinned up, was generous, but her generosity was limited to family. In addition to producing miracles in her kitchen, serving as defender of her grandchildren against parental scorn or spankings, and listening to the tear-inducing operas of Giuseppe Verdi, she served as the more practical and serious half of the couple. It was her job to balance the books, close the cash register, and fret that her husband's largesse would bankrupt them. Ralph's big heart, which had been pumping since the end of the 19th century, gave out at the relatively young age of 68, leaving my grandmother a widow in her 50s. Ralph died with the store ledger full of IOUs. My aunt and uncle gradually took over the store, and in the summer of 1968, my widowed grandmother took a pair of cousins and me to Vico. I was 10 years old, and it turned out to be the magical summer of my childhood. We stayed with relatives in town and spent our days and evenings in Vico's marina area, known as Seiano, with its panoramic views of Naples and Vesuvius, the same view I'd seen depicted in Italian restaurant murals painted in New York or Boston's North End. In Seiano, the extended family, cousins, uncles, aunts, and in-laws, gathered at O Saracino, the seafront restaurant owned and run by my grandfather Ralph's nephew Ciro Aiello. My cousins and I spent our days diving off the docks of O Saracino into the sea with our Italian cousins. At lunchtime, we ate spaghetti on the shaded terrace. We followed our cousins around Vico's streets, and at night we gathered again on O Saracino's terrace to eat long rectangular pizzas that stretched down the center of the table. It was as carefree as summer gets.